Welcome to knitting the leg and shaping the toe of our sock. We're going to start by making sure that you're knitting it to the correct length. So in the pattern you will see that it talks about knitting to 1.5 to 2 inches before the desired length. What that is the length of your foot is the desired length. So you'll have seen how to measure your foot in some of the earlier details shared via email and in the Facebook group. So the first thing you're going to do is, where do you measure from when you're measuring the sock to make sure you've knit to the right length? We're just going to show you that now. So the measurement is taken from the back of the heel, so the half of the heel flap, and measured up towards the toe. So you will knit to the length that you want, less the amount told to you in the pattern depending on the size you're making. So for example, if I'm making a 10-inch sock, I'm going to knit to 8 inches and then I'll be ready to shape my toe if the size I'm following says knit to 2 inches before the desired length. And that's how you measure your sock, the foot of your sock for this pattern. So there's very little that's special about knitting the leg of the foot of the sock, and in this pattern it's just knit as rounds of stocking stitch. So the only thing that you need to bear in mind is that, again, if you are keeping a pattern correct or anything like that, that is just something to bear in mind. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to knit around the first round of this, and we're going to continue doing it. But I'm going to show you a little trick for making sure that your socks are the same size. It's a little bit like the marker placement for the heel flap. So once you've knit the first few stitches from one needle to the other, as you do for DPNs, just going to get a stitch marker and place it into the sock just before the first row that you've just worked, so that you can mark where you've started your foot. What this marker does is it allows you to know how many rows you've knit in your foot, and when you come to knitting the second one, you will also place a marker and then be able to count the same number of rows. We'll place a corresponding marker when we start the toe shaping, so that you can count exactly how many rows. So then you're just going to continue on across the instep stitches, and again, if you are working a pattern, it may tell you to keep the pattern correct as you go across the instep. And as with all of the other DPNs, you keep changing needles as you come to them. You can also, in this, you can also spiral them, as we did in the earlier DPN tutorials, to make sure that you get any unevenness worked out. So by knitting extra stitches off of each needle and spiraling, I would say if you're doing that, make sure you put in your start of round marker. Another note on lengths here is if you're knitting socks for somebody as a gift, you can ask them their shoe size, and then based on that you'll be able to find online with a quick search what that is in inches or in centimeters, depending on how you like to do your socks. Also, you may just have seen in the video I knit into the back of the last stitch, because this is around after I've done my shaping for the gussets. This is just that little neat trick I talked about in the previous videos. And now you're back to the start of the round, and you're going to keep on knitting until the sock is the right length, and I will be back to you once I've that done for the toe shaping. So you've now knit your leg. This is a very short leg because this is a tutorial sock. You are now ready to start the shaping of your toe. So what you're doing here is you look that you have your stitches in your instep on one side, essentially, of your shaping, and your sole side, or that used to be your heel stitches, on the other. And you're going to be decreasing along the sides on both the top and the bottom, on both the left and right of the sock. And what that does is it shapes the toe in around your toes. There are different styles and shapes of toe. This is a very basic toe, and over time, again, you will find the one that suits you best. I've never had a problem with this one, but I know other people like to do different toes. So the toe shaping is worked in two parts. The first part, which is about 2/3 of the rows, is a decrease round and then a knit round, a decrease round and a knit round, and then towards the end, to bring the shaping in much quicker, you do just decrease rounds. Your pattern will tell you how many of each that you need to do. So it is key when you start here that you have the same number of stitches on the bottom as the top. Ideally you have the same on all 4 needles. So in this case I have 11 on each. It's really key that the top and the bottom match though, because you cannot graft the toe if there's a different number of stitches. Fudging a graft is not an ideal situation. So we're going to start now by doing our first decrease round. And the way this works is that you are told to knit to 3 stitches before the start of the instep, and in this case you've obviously marked those with the ends of your needles. So you're going to knit to 3 stitches before. You're then going to work your first decrease, which is a knit 2 together decrease. You're going to knit 1 stitch, change needles. You're then going to knit the next stitch. Then you're going to do another decrease, which is a slip slip knit decrease. And there are a pair of decreases along the right hand side of your sock. You're then going to knit across the rest of your instep stitches. Just to say here, you are likely to be finished any pattern that you're going to be doing, but do keep an eye out for it in case there's a little bit of a pattern on the toe. Now, just a little thing to match the marker we put in earlier. Put in another marker to mark where you've finished your leg and started your toe. And this is really useful for later on when you go to another sock and you know exactly how many rows you put into the foot. And that allows you to make a perfect pair. Although they don't need to be perfect. It's nothing to stay up at night over, but it is useful to kind of give yourself something to aim for in the second sock, because it'll make it seam faster when you're knitting it. So once you've that done, you just continue on across the instep stitches. And you knit to 3 stitches before the end of the instep. So this is different to the gusset obviously, because you're going to be doing decreases on both sides, both in the instep and on the sole stitches. So you knit to 3 before. And again you knit 2 together. You knit 1. You change needles. Knit 1 and a slip slip knit, and this is the decreases that match, these matching decreases match the other decreases on the other side, so you can just see how that's done in the sock. So that's your first decrease round, and that would have started you decreasing your toe. Now the next round is a plain round, so just a plain round of knitting, so you're going to knit all the way around. In this round you have the option of knitting into the backs of your slip slip knits, again like we did when we were shaping the gusset, but that's personal preference rather than something that you have specifically for socks. And as you knit this round you'll be able to see the very slight inward movement of your decreases so that you can see them as they appear. Again, that's knitting into the back of the slip slip knit stitch. Not necessary unless you like doing it. So something to be aware of here is to be careful not to decrease in the wrong places. You can fix it later on by kind of evening out your decreases, but I would say that it is very important that once you get to the graft you have the same number of stitches top and bottom. And again knitting into the back of that stitch. And then you are back to the start of the round. So once you've that done, you can now see that the shaping is ever so slightly taking place on both sides of your sock. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to knit a decrease, knit round, decrease, knit round, all the way until I have the number of stitches left. And I'll come back to you when I'm doing my last row before I get ready to graft. So we're now on to the last round of the decreases. We'll just go through this because it's not that special, but just to show you it as we do it. It's the last round before you then do the setup for the graft, which we will do today, but we won't graft until the video tomorrow. So the first thing you do is you're going to do the last set of decreases to bring you to 16 stitches. It's 16 stitches in all versions of the pattern. This DK version it is. So you just knit. Now you can leave your stitch marker off this time because you're not going to need that anymore. You then knit your 2 together, last shaping on the underside of the left. You swap over. You then, again, you're just doing your last decreases, your slip slip knit. Apologies for this being slightly off the screen, but it is the same as the previous rows. And again, you're going to knit across here to 3 stitches before the end, do a knit 2 together, knit 1, change needles, and then you're going to do your last slip knit. And then we'll just show you how to set up for the graft, because this is just the last piece of the decreasing that you will do today. So once you've come to that point, you have decreased your toe fully. You can see the nice way that it looks on both sides. And you can see that your yarn is still in the middle of the sole, and we'll talk about how to change that in just a second. So now you can see that you have 8 on top and 8 on bottom for this pattern, obviously depending on the size. Oh, actually it is 8 on both sides for this. So once you get to that, you are going to need to set up for the graft. To set up for the graft, the first thing that you do is you knit all of the remaining stitches on needle 2. So the other needle that is on the sole stitches of your sock. Now with this, you're not doing any other decreasing, you're just essentially knitting the stitches until your yarn is positioned at the other side so that it's at the end of the stitches rather than the center. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to turn it over, and you are going to just slip the stitches from needle 4 onto needle 3 so that all of your instep, well, previously the instep stitches, now the top of your sock, all face one another. So that is all it is. There is that you have your 8 facing 8 stitches ready to graft. And then you're going to cut your yarn, leaving yourself a little tail. I usually say about 5 or 6 times the length of what you're going to graft, just to be very conservative. And then we're going to cover grafting your toe in the next video.